Hello, how are you?
Good. My name is Nick. I'm an aerospace engineering student here. Got a couple questions.
Awesome.
That's all right. So I'm particularly concerned about your brand of Christianity. As a Christian myself, Christian nationalism I do not agree with at all. I think it's antithetical to the values of the early church. And I think, how do you reconcile especially white Christians in this America, marrying politics and power with their faith in this country?
Well, there's a lot there. I've never described myself as a Christian nationalist. So I'm a Christian and a nationalist, so I've never used those two
And
things.
then right there, that and nationalist, where in the scriptures does a Christian...
Well, thank you. Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation that you are in, because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare. Let me continue. Daniel fasted and prayed for his nation. Esther and Mordecai cared for their nation. They were counsel to the king.
Right.
Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Joseph, Jacob. I could keep on going. Moses, Aaron. In fact, Moses was so political that he wrote an entire book of the Torah all about how to set up a government. It's the book of Deuteronomy. So, in fact, the Bible is an explicitly political text amongst many other things.
Now, can we interpret those texts in the light of the revelation of Christ? Because you just cited all Old Testament texts, but you've not once cited St. Paul.
Okay, yeah. If you want me to also, by the way, just so we are
cite St. Paul about the kingdom of heaven and the governance.
Just so we're clear, do you think that the New Testament is greater than the Old Testament?
It is. It is greater because the revelation of Christ dictates how we interpret the Old Testament.
So you think that all of a sudden, like Genesis 1 is not as great just because of the New Testament?
The Old Testament was a type and shadow of the things to come, and now we live in the full revelation of Christ.
Again, that is
by definition
such
lesser.
a dangerous theological...
That's not true. That's Christological theology.
Hold on. Of course I believe in the resurrection. But to all of a sudden say that, like, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth is, like, somehow lesser because of the revelation of the New Testament. Christ even said, I did not come to abolish the law of the prophets, I came to fulfill the law. In fact, he said all the laws of the prophet hang on the two teachings, Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 3 through 5. However, to use a New Testament example, as you asked, says in 1 Timothy, pray for your leaders in authority by name that they might make righteous and great decisions. I'm going to continue. Christ our Lord said, on this rock build my what?
Church.
Wrong. Ecclesia. It's not the word church.
Okay,
the word
English
church,
translations of Common Bible say church, so my bad.
well, actually, it shouldn't, because the original Greek term says, on this rock build my government structure. Ecclesia was a secular word used in that time, which was all about the advancement of freedom and liberty, which are the two words in Greek, eleutheria, isonomia, which are the two words there. So the point being, Christ called us to be salt and light. We as Christians should change the environment that we come in contact with. That's what salt and light do. So why should we then not care about changing government to be more Christ-like?
Well, you're conflating changing government to be more Christ-like with what I was discussing was nationalistic endeavors, which is the inherent view that our nation is better than other nations.
Well, it is.
Well, God shows no partiality. So
well, no, that's not true. God says in Revelation, I will judge the nations. God says that
the nations means ethnicity groups. It does not mean borders of countries established.
Not necessarily. Hold on.
It does.
God says the Constitution of Israel will come at the end of the age. Borders is biblical. The entire book of Nehemiah is about building a wall around the nation of Israel. In fact, the idea of borders, the idea of sovereignty, is an explicitly biblical idea.
Yes, but Israel is no longer defined by the physical borders. It's actually defined in the spiritual sons and daughters of God who believe in Jesus.
That's a Catholic interpretation.
That's not just Catholic.
Again, it's primarily a Catholic interpretation. I don't share it. I don't want to get into that theological debate. Because we're going to get nowhere. My mind won't be changed. Your mind won't be changed. But around nationalism, why don't you tell me, and I will listen, what a Christian's role in government should or should not be?
Simple. Sermon on the Mount. Operate in that way, and that's...
What does that look like in practice in America in 2025?
Well, in practice, it doesn't look like what has happened in history with... Christians who have tried to establish their governance in the lands. For example, American history, slavery. Majority of white Christians supported the institution of slavery. Move on to Jim Crow.
That's actually not true.
No, that is true. That is true.
Time out. 9 out of 13 of the states, by the time of the ratification of the Constitution, were already abolishing slavery. 9 out of 13.
Let's move on to Jim Crow.
Time out. Slavery actually had a minority approval rating by the time of the U.S. founding. We were the second nation ever to abolish slavery because of Christianity. So let me just ask a very moral question. The Christians that got involved in the abolition of slavery, like John Quincy Adams and William Wilberforce, they did it in the name of Christ. Were they wrong?
No, but those were small minority Christians. Majority of the Christians of the time.
Movements.
let's move on to Jim Crow, because majority.
You're moving on
No, because
it
I
was,
didn't finish my statement.
But it was
You interrupted my
Christianity that
statement.
abolished slavery.
It was a sect in Christianity that abolished it. It was a remnant of Christians who didn't go with the established order of what Christians believed.
Well, no.
We can go to Jim Crow. Let me finish the statement, please.
Okay, I mean,
in Jim Crow, majority of white Christians also supported not abolishing Jim Crow and keeping the institution. They did not support the civil rights movement. This is documented data.
Well, not supporting the Civil Rights Act and supporting Jim Crow are two completely different things.
Those go hand in hand
Well,
together.
the Civil Rights Act was a disaster. I mean, that was a terrible idea. But I mean, that's a whole separate issue. But just so we are clear, because the Civil Rights Act hyper-racialized America. We actually talk about race more after the Civil Rights Act than before. We were promised a color-bride society. We got a race-obsessed society. But just to be clear, today in America, what does a Christian properly involved in government look like?
I'm just going to say the same thing I said, the Sermon on the Mount.
Okay,
love your neighbor as yourself. Take others before your own needs. Feed the poor. Clothe the sick. Care for the widow.
Yeah,
advocate for these values.
I agree with all that. And so, for example, to care for the poor and care for the vulnerable, abolish abortion. Right?
So abortion is another issue, but what about the living right now? Because
Yes.
you don't seem to be for raising taxes on billionaires.
Of course not. Why would I?
So if you want to legislate morality, abortion, I want to curb the sin of greed.
But so you want to curb the sin of greed
So
by taking other people's stuff? That's pretty greedy of you.
No, it is not. It is not.
It's no